We Americans. We Americans. And if you disagree with the American part, that's fine. But you put Moorish American on it, you put African American on it, you put, I've heard immigrant Americans, I've heard all these different things. In America, why anybody oppose that? I just think that's the weirdest shit ever to me, right? People opposing power. People like we are.
Let me just pause there 1 sec. Islam, Moors.
Islam.
We're here again once more. To the Moors in the chat. Peace and love. We started a little bit early today because the native Aboriginal, autochthonous, non-Moors talking crazy on their stuff, telling us to go suck stuff and all of that. So we said we might as well go early today so we can get some stuff out there. Now, first question for the Moors, since they like to go live and whatever. First question for the Moors. The indigenous guys said that they are Americans. They are Americans. Could anybody speak on what an American is and how Americans are tied to the Moors? Anybody could go in there.
Shalom, brother Yusuf. You was always on, so I like to give you a chance to take a break, if you don't mind, because you know where I'm going. Islam, boy. Islam. Because now we know where I'm going. You know where we're going on that, right? Yep. So, to answer Grand Heckie's question, I'm going to the American Dictionary of the English Language, Noah Webster, 1828.
Oh, Islam,
English Dictionary
before,
of the land.
Before you do that, just put your appellation on the record, just so the Moors know, know that we're family.
Islam. Peace and love. This is Brother Isbay, calling from northwest of Maxim, out Morocco. And I'm coming out of the American Dictionary of the English Language, Noah Webster, 1828. American. Noun. A native of America. Originally applied to the Aboriginals. Hey, there they are. Who are the Aboriginals? Copper-colored races found here by the Europeans. Any other questions, Reneki?
Islam, more. And how is American tied to the Moors?
Because the oldest recognized people on the planet, according to the United Nations, are the Washita Moors. Say what you want about Washita, but they're called Moors. So Moors are Moors, period. And like our good friend Norma Jid said, we are all Moors.
Islam, Brother Yusuf, you got anything to add on with that?
Islam. I don't have the book on me, but Frank Joseph in the book, what is it? Lost Colonies, Ancient Lost Colonies of America. In his book, though, he speaks of America being pronounced as Amaru or Amarak, which the Phoenicians named it here. When they were traveling in here, they what it meant was the North Star. So, according to Frank Joseph, Amarak, or in the word America as well, or American, you have American or Al-Moroccan. It's phonetically, it's the Moors. Amir or a seafarer, that's the Moors. That's not an Indian, whatever. Amir, it has all to do with Morocco. I remember Abdullah was going in one day in class, because we say
American. The way Abdullah teaches is that's redundant because you're saying more and more.
Yeah.
Because American is more. That's more. You're saying you're a more and more. So you can just say you're a more. That's why when my son, I ask him his nationality, he just says I'm a more, which will include the word American, because that's what it was. And another thing, American isn't Indian language. That's not Choctaw. That's not Blackfoot language. American is not a so-called Indian word. So I don't know how Indians can call themselves American, because I was listening to the video earlier and he was like, oh, well, y'all got a problem with the word American. Like, that has nothing to do with Indians. Nothing. I'm Moroccan. The word in the word itself, Amir, it means it goes back to the Moors, the seafarer, right in it. And Frank Joseph qualifies it. The Phoenicians called it that. Not no Indians. And the Phoenicians were the Canaanites. Those was Moors. That's the Moors. Those was Moors. Islam, Grand Sheikh.
Islam. Now, the other tie is with regard to this concept of Moors are North African and indigenous people continuing to say that Moors are African, go back to Africa. What do you say about Moors being only African according to these Aboriginal indigenous people?
There's a lot of ground. I think there's so many ways to poke a big hole in what that.
Oh yeah, poke as many holes as you want, more. We got time.
Okay. All right. So to start with, anybody can go on any computer that they want. Use your favorite search engine, and you'll find an article that came out not that long ago. I know that I showed it a few times, where you'll see that soil samples from over here were taken, with soil samples taken on the northwestern shores of what they call now the continent of Africa, which we really know is Asia. And what the article goes in on is how the soil actually lines up perfectly, perfect match with the soil from what we call Newark, New Jersey, and what they call over there Morocco, or the Kingdom of Morocco. It doesn't take much more than that to be able to know that at one time the two land masses were really one, or still are one, and just got separated by a body of water, a pond.
Islam. Do you have anything to add to that, Brother Yusuf?
I'm glad he went there, because that's exactly where I was going. And because it's numerous articles of, North Africa and America being connected. And it's just common sense. When you look at the map, everything fits like a puzzle. They tell you everything was connected. That's common. That's like commonly known. Everybody knows once upon a time all the continents was conjoined together. They called it Pangea. Everything was connected. But are they going by Eurocentric thinking, by saying we weren't on Earth yet? We weren't civilized yet? We weren't running government and stuff like that time? Like, all of that was being ran. All of that was being ran. But if they had Eurocentric thinking, they would think nothing was going on. But again, all these buildings that I forgot the lady's name, that's been going on with all this, the European daughter who's been putting in all this work, showing the Moorish catalog and stuff. That's not
Michelle Gibson, brother?
Michelle Gibson. Yep. Thank you. Give thanks, Lord. Michelle Gibson showing all this ancient architecture. None of those is teepees. Who built that? Who built all this Moorish architecture?
Right, and then since
it's named Moorish architecture.
Right. We'll also go to the PhD, Jose Pimenta Bay, Othello's Children in the New World, page 71. A Francis Moore referred to in biographical sketches of loyalists of the American Revolution is described as a native of America, of New York. Here, native seems to imply that he was an American Indian, and his New York home even suggests a connection with the Six Nations, Iroquois League. The E-less spelling of the last name Moore strongly suggests that either his phenotype or nationality indicated Moorish ancestral ties. The same may have also been true of a Hosea Moore of Stillwater in Albany County, New York. Hosea is recorded as a loyalist who joined the Royal Army in 1777. Significantly, the late 19th century Scottish historian David McRitchie makes a rather matter-of-fact statement about the presence of Moors in North America. While discussing the practice of various peoples darkening or blackening their faces, McRitchie writes, "Many brown-skinned races have blackened their faces artificially. Example, certain Fijians of the present day and the Moors of North America in the days of William Penn." Unfortunately, McRitchie doesn't explain why such brown-skinned Moors in North America blackened their faces in the first place, but his reference is highly intriguing. Reverend Ellenzer Wheelock was the founder and director of a school whose name demands attention, Moors Indian Charity School. According to an original text published in 1811, the school was named for its major contributor, Joshua Moore, who donated money and a house in November of 1763. But mysteriously, little information is given, if any, of the original source about the school's generous namesake, Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore is simply referred to as a respectable farmer in Mansfield who made the first considerable donation to it. Students at Reverend Wheelock's school included members of the Iroquois League, Delaware, Narragansetts, Mohawks, Mohegans. There were also independent English youth who initially attended and made up about half of the student population. But the school's records show that special attention was given to instructing Oneidas and Mohawks. Ralph Wheelock was Eliezer's brother and co-educator at the school. Ralph spoke of having several quote-unquote Indians handed over to him to be educated at the school. He spoke of 12 such educated Indians who returned home from the Congress, which had been held among the Six Nations. In addition to the Wheelock brothers, there were also some American Indian instructors at the school, David Fowler, a Montauk, Joseph Woolley, and Hezekiah Calvin, both Delawares, and Moses, Peter Johannes, Abraham Primus, and Abraham Secundus, who were all Mohawks. Like many other scholars of their day, the Wheelocks fully thought that there was a connection between the Indians of the American continent and the ancient people of Judea and Israel. Eliezer said that such Indians were the descendants of Abraham. Eliezer listed several of the points which convinced him of the connection. Eliezer pointed out that many American Indians and the ancient Asiatic peoples of the Holy Lands were both known to 1. wear white garments during holy events. 2, wear conch shell breastplates like those of the Hebrews. 3, have a high priest and a prophet who fasted and prayed. 4, possess an ark, such as at Otahite, which held sacred vessels. Only priests were allowed to observe the contents. 5, possess white towns where anyone might seek refuge if convicted of a crime, including murder. In such towns, no blood could be shed. 6, hold similar customs of mourning. 7, customarily take new names with new conditions. 8, practice atonement, cleansing, fasting, and forgiving annually. 9, practice circumcision such as those of the Amazon. Eleazar Wheelock also cited linguistic connections. He noted that there was a remarkable analogy between many Indian and Hebrew words. Wheelock also spoke of analogies with Mexico's Indian peoples. He said the language of Mexico can be traced to the languages of Persia, the Kurdic, the Arabs, and the Tartars. Reverend Wheelock believed the same of the Delaware, the Iroquois nations, Cherokees, Creeks, Choctaws, and many other tribes in North and South America. He, like McIntosh and several others, also asserted connections to China and Japan. Eleazar Wheelock said America's Indians were of Asiatic origin. He wrote, to support the Asiatic origin of our savages, the ancient forts and mounds of the western country, the Ohio Valley, bring in their united testimony. These are less frequent on the Atlantic than to the west of our high range of mountains. Wheelock also speaks of Indian castles, which he described as Indian towns with high palisades surrounding them. Islam. Now, we also want to touch on, because one of the Aboriginal indigenous scholar guys were making the reference that Venezuela was named after Venice because when they went there, they noticed that it looked like Venice. So what would that mean that Venezuela looked like? Well, let's just see. The Islamic impact on Venice. The latest Islamic tastes were often reflected in the homes of the richest Venetians, for whom luxury objects from the East became desired collectibles. Islamic art and architecture also influenced Venetian painting. Artists who traveled to Islamic lands were fascinated by the people, garments, and architecture they saw and sketched them in meticulous detail. Many brought their drawings back to Europe, where they circulated widely in artistic circles. Such sketches influenced a whole generation of painters and led to the popularity of Eastern scenes and costumes in Venice. And then they say, check this picture right here. So I'll just show you this picture to show you the Islamic presence in Venice. Now, if that's the Islamic presence in Venice, and that's Italy, and then that looks like the Alhambra, which was built by the Moors, and then Venezuela is named after Venice, and then the architecture in Venezuela, when the Europeans went there, reminded them of Venice. Common sense would tell you that is because the place looked Islamic. If Venezuela looked Islamic, then where else around here looked Islamic? If Christopher Columbus came here and he saw a mosque on the hill, and the Franciscan priests are gonna see Indians here and say these Moors and stuff like that, what the hell you think they saw when they came over here? some grass skirt, leather skirt wearing guys? Or did they see everything Moorish when they came here? And this is the issue that I have with these people. Because they would claim that they're everything else. When you have stone telling you that over here is Moorish, you're not going to convince me about some Aboriginal, Indigenous, Autochthon BS. Because like the Moor said, Anur Madrid said, we are all Moors. You can't even get around it. If you want to get around it, you're playing yourself. Venetian paintings, particularly of biblical subjects, incorporated settings inspired by Mamluk Egypt and Ottoman Turkey. In addition to artistic influence, oh yeah, and keep in mind, anytime you hear Ottoman, that's late Moorish Empire. Don't hear Ottoman and then you're starting to talk about some Turks and all that stuff when the Ottoman Turks came out of the Moorish Empire. In addition to artistic influence, the Islamic world also contributed to the scientific growth of Venetian culture. Many of the classical, astronomical, and mathematical treaties known in Venice were originally introduced through Arabic translations. See Science and the Art of the Islamic World. These various connections left a very tangible legacy in Venice. By the 19th century, some of the most important and largest collections of Islamic art were in Venetian lands. Walter Denny. Ottoman velvets were for the most part woven not in Istanbul, but in the old Ottoman capital, an important provincial center of Bursa. Bursa velvets were used extensively as costumes and vestments by Europeans, especially by Russians. But in the Ottoman Empire, which again was the Moorish Empire, they were used almost exclusively not for costumes, but as furnishing fabrics. Among the most beloved genres of Ottoman furnishing fabrics was the yastik, a flat bolster cover, sometimes with a medallion and sometimes with repeated designs in which a characteristic end finished of lappets and flap-like forms in which small palisades containing flowers, carnations or tulips or rosebuds are frequently visible. Bursa velvets, unlike Persian velvets, always show us a very limited palette. Generally, there is one ground color, overwhelmingly red, with little accents of green. Red with little accents of green? What does that sound like to you? Doesn't that sound Moorish? Islam Moors. I don't know if you have anything to add on before I continue on.
Islam, Green Sheik.
Islam.
You just give all the information. You killed them because even with the when you had mentioned the conquistadors coming over and saying those Moors, we even showed the document in that book where they referred to Montezuma's headdress as the Moorish hat.
Moorish hat.
And this was in the 1500s.
Mm-hmm.
Then we also showed the document where it says that in 1621 the word Indian the word Moor was substituted for the word Indian. Up until 1621 it was just Moorish. They changed it.
Moorish. All up and down this, it was Moorish. Unavoidable. Islam more.
I just wanted to add on the candle back on the point, Ushu Braneki, that not only was current day Mexico Moorish, but all of South America. I'm coming out of a book called Historical Researches on the Conquest of Peru, Mexico, Bogota, Natchez, and Talameco in the 13th century by the Mongols. This book's written by John Rankin. I'm just going to read a sentence. This is page 94. It's going over the lineage of Caciques are the current day, what we would call current day Spanish speaking, Moors in south of Mexico. And they're describing what they're usually wear on their head. And this is coming from the 13th century. They wear upon their heads a covering, in parentheses, toque, fig, and Galande, which is French, translates to toque of garland, which they call Pilu, Pillu. Now, why would I bring that up? You may want to Google and search Pillu, and then look on images, and you'll clearly see, may not have a tassel, may not be red, but you'll find nothing but a fez. Islam.
Islam. Let me just go see that. Was it P-I?
Pillu.
Pilu. A toque. Now, the question now, because we've listed some references, the Aboriginal guys are saying that, why do we need to show books? Why do we need to show books? Because can't you just think? Could you speak on the point of why people should have references, especially book references?
I think the key about having the books or points of reference is best summarized by the Aboriginal and Indigenous argument that was recently made. Said that reading what you read isn't necessarily what is the message that's trying to be conveyed. It's not just about reading the words. It's all about something, and I'm going to paraphrase for the brother.
Right.
It's all about comprehension. So one cannot comprehend for themselves if they don't have the source material. If you're hearing someone else's interpretation, then you're basing your perception on that subject matter off someone else's comprehension. By having the source, you're free to go, look up the material, read it, digest it, look up the words that you don't know, make sure you don't go past any, because if you do, you may miss the actual point that the data is trying to give you. But that's just basic research.
Islam. You got anything to add, Brother Yusuf?
Islam. And just to add on, another reason we use books for reference is because, man does not know what man is told. I don't want to just you to take my word for it. I'm going to give you the reference where you can go look it up for yourself. Because that we always say it all the time. This isn't what I'm saying. It's in the literature. This isn't us saying it. We get it from the literature because we don't want people to believe what we're saying. Like, it's a fact. You know, like, that's the whole thing. Like, as soon as you get the reference, you see that it's a fact. He didn't say this. I didn't, you know, like, when we bring up the reference that they found the Moorish hat in 1521, none of us even existed in 1521. That's a major reference. You know what I mean? Like, that's, you know, that's a major reference. Like, if we just say that, you know what I mean? Like, that's nothing. But when you tell you, oh yeah, you can go research it, put it in the Google search, you know, and it go into the books. When you go into the Google search, click books and search it, it'll pop right up, show you what book it's in and everything. And like the master teacher said, it really wasn't even hidden.
Yeah.
Like it was simple. It was simple. But that's a major. Like, I couldn't say that. I couldn't just say, oh, they changed the word in 1620. I wouldn't think to make that up. Like, I read that. We read that. Showed the reference. Like, that's why I love to show references from books, because you get to see the fact for yourself. Islam.
Mm-hmm. Islam. Now again, just going back to this Venice thing, so you can get the whole perspective about Venezuela and the Moors, and why FOH to all these Aboriginal indigenous people talking BS. Even St. Mark's Basilica, built when Venice was still a semi-autonomous outpost of the Byzantine Empire, and originally modeled on the Holy Apostles' Church in Constantinople, underwent some extraordinary modifications. Its low-curving Byzantine domes were raised and given their present bulbous profiles in imitation of Mamluk mosques and tombs, and the church's grand portals were restructured to lend them a distinctly Moorish flavor. A distinctly Moorish flavor. So again, when you go to Venice and they say they named Venezuela after Venice, this is what they saw in Venezuela. They saw stuff like look like this in Venezuela. They ain't no Indians, Aboriginal, Autochtons built anything looking like this. They saw things looking like this in Venezuela. Right? Remember that Venice's architecture is Gothic and Eastern. One thing to notice when you're looking at Venice's architecture in general, with its elegant pointed arches and lacy details, is just how different it looks from the architecture you see in, say, Rome or Florence. Unlike those cities, Venice was at its most prosperous during the Middle Ages. By the 12th century, it was already a powerful and moneyed republic. And at that time, Gothic-style architecture was the trend. Unsurprisingly, therefore, Venetian architecture became largely Gothic architecture, with its asymmetricality and emphasis on light. After the Renaissance hit, you know, the Renaissance is the Moors, with its focus on rationalism and balance, architects started to incorporate some of its hallmarks, like rounded rather than pointed arches. Even so, they continue to blend Renaissance innovations with that same Gothic style. Plus, unlike other Italian cities, Venice had close ties to the East thanks to its vast trade networks. A lot of Venetian architecture, therefore, was taken from Byzantine and Moorish styles. So what did these people see when they went to Venezuela? What did they see? They saw stuff that looked Moorish. What did they see? They saw stuff that looked Moorish when they went to Venezuela. And you just pull up pictures of Venezuela and they'll show you the same stuff that they got going on right now there. Aboriginal and indigenous, but denying the connection to the Moors. Now, once again, for these Aboriginal, indigenous, whoever's, again, Jose Pimenta Bay, Othello's Children of the New World. In Mexico, Mande Muslims were in the majority, though there were also some Fula, Tukulor, and Mosi Muslims as well. The legacy of the Mande Muslim in Mexico today are seen in the Amerindian magic and the numerous places in Mexico which bear their name. In addition, we observe Mande Islamic religious traditions among the Indians and Mande words in the Nahulatan language, Othmi and Nanticoke languages. Again, it is significant that all such ethnic groups mentioned occupy the historic boundaries of Moorish dominions. The connection to the Nanticoke is particularly relevant as this Delaware-based nation specifically asserts Moorish origins and has a sister nation known as the Moors. Aboriginal indigenous, but you're not claiming nothing Moorish? But the people who are in Mexico, even though they're going to talk about Fula and Mandi and Tucolor and Mosi and all that stuff, they're still saying Moorish. Why? Because everybody knows, even Spanish-speaking people know, that African countries, African tribes, African nations were part of the Moroccan Empire. And the Moroccan Empire went from over there across the Great Atlantis onto the present North, South, and Central Americas and the adjoining islands. Why is it so hard for these people to accept the fact that they're Moors? Why is it that they're going to talk so crazy about rights and that they're Aboriginal and indigenous, what the UN tells these Aboriginal and indigenous people that they have a right to a nationality, and these people are arbitrarily denying themselves their right to a nationality and claiming that they're some tribe? And want to know how come Moors don't want to deal with them? And how come Moors going to go in their chat and talk crazy at them to try to wake them up, and then they're going to be blocking Moors from being able to talk in their chat? Because obviously they know that we have something right to say. Why would you block somebody if they're talking crazy and wrong? Why wouldn't you let the person talking wrong talk? Just let them talk. If Moors are so wrong, why are you blocking us in your chat? Obviously we have something right to say. And then they're going to put their little link to go on their little platform so these people could try to run train on one more. They could bum rush one more on their little platform, but they're not going to tell the people that the more been emailed them about, why don't we set up something so we can discuss this? Since you guys are so about unity or whatever, how come you don't set up a separate thing for Moors and the Aboriginal indigenous to come together in unity and have a discussion? No, they don't want to do that. They want to do the versus Frank Gary BS and tell Moors to go suck stuff and all of that stuff, and have their little minions in their chat LOLing and throwing up feathers and all this type of BS, when we already know that these people are sellouts. That's why I went on their thing and I told them that they're sellouts, because there's no way that they're going to agree that they're indigenous. But when Moors bring up nationality, and that nationality is the order of the day, they don't want to hear what Moors are saying. They're going to talk about, we don't need to know any of that. We don't need to do that. It's not about nationality. Moors are Berbers and all this stuff, talking crazy. Again, we already know what's up. We got our birthright. We could lock down YouTube tomorrow and not give a shit about anybody out here. Forget giving anybody info. Find us if you want to know something about Moors. But no, we have a duty as Moors to uplift fallen humanity because humanity has fallen. And we're about that radical enlightenment. We're about beat you with the spike bat to wake you up. Forget slap you with a book. Spike bat to your head to wake you up. Guarantee that you're going to learn from Moors. Guarantee. And we have enough Moors that were Negro, black, colored, that woke the hell up because of Moors. You name them. You're not going to find me any Aboriginal, Indigenous, whoever, that woke up somebody, because if they're still claiming they're Aboriginal, Indigenous, they ain't waking anybody up. People still sleep. If they were Negro, black, colored, and now they're Aboriginal, Indigenous, they're still asleep. Because nationality is the order of the day. What's your nationality? You don't have one? That means you're stateless. That's not opinion. That's fact. Go actually, you know, we'll ask the UN. Let's just ask the UN, see what they say. The right to a nationality. The right to a nationality is a fundamental human right. It applies the right of each individual to acquire, change, and retain a nationality. International human rights law provides that the right of states to decide who their nationals are is not absolute. And in particular, states must comply with their human rights obligations concerning the granting and loss of nationality. Arbitrary deprivation of nationality. The right to retain a nationality corresponds to the prohibition of arbitrary deprivation of nationality. That's what these people are doing to all these Aboriginal and Indigenous people that they're claiming are their tribes up and feathers up and all that BS. They're depriving people of a nationality. That's international war crime that these people are doing. Telling you to claim some tribe when the international community already agreed that you Indigenous people have a right to a nationality. Moors are telling you what your nationality is and you're in denial. Nanticoke don't have no problem saying that they're Moors. Delawares don't have no problem saying that they're Moors. None of these other Indian tribes historically don't have a problem saying that they're Moors. It's only these Moors that are around today that want to keep you asleep because they know that right now it's the time of radical enlightenment. Radical enlightenment means you are going to get the spike back to your head to wake up. Forget talk to you about some books. The order of the day is nationality. It has been since Noble Drew Ali's been on the scene, since all these so-called Aboriginal Indigenous people used to wear turbans and used to wear, what's it called? Punies and all this stuff. Fezzes without tassels on them. Have Arabic names, Muslim names. Everything that they're doing is damn reference to some Muslim. And these people are in denial, trying to keep our people deaf, dumb, and blind, removing them from the fact that they're Moors and that that's their nationality. And they keep bringing up some stuff of who called you that and who named us Moors and all this stuff. When these people recognized Dr. Ben and he said, we were calling ourselves Moors. Nobody calling us Moors. We called ourselves that. Islam Moors. Islam. You got anything to throw in right now?
I just wanted to add it on earlier when you were speaking of Venezuela, that Horace Butler mentions that Venezuela is really Phoenicia. That, and I wanted to, because that's back to the Moors again. That's not Indians. That goes right back to the Moors. So They can look up Boris Butler. That's another reference, and he's even telling you, you know, like America. Even in the word America, it goes back to the Moors. There goes back to the Moors again. Boris Butler. When rocks cry out, you can get the book. He tells you all about it. I just wanted to mention that because you was going. And then another thing, Venezuela, that's Venus, and we also know that our flag has the, and you mentioned it too when they talked about the green and the red.
Yep.
That's our flag. That's our flag. Venezuela, that's Venus. That's our flag. All of this whole thing is Morocco. There was I'm not gonna mention because I couldn't find the reference. But we talked about it before. They might have taken it down, but we talked about it a couple years back. Remember we found that governor when he referred to the South of America as South of Barbary?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
People can research that if they still let us find that. But I tried to find it before, I couldn't find it. But I remember we found it that day, and we had the reference up. So everybody knows that this is Morocco. This ain't India. This ain't Indios. This ain't none of that. This Morocco. This Indios.
Los Indios.
Oh yeah, that's where they really kill themselves too, because that's where that Indian we showed the reference. If a so-called Native American wrote the book, letting you know.
Yeah.
Oh, that came from the Vatican. That was Los Indios, the godless heathens, or the godless ones. Those who felt God.
Yep.
Islam.
It's a fact. Islam, Mar.
Well, I got to go to Brother Yusuf's, one of Brother Yusuf's favorite sources, because it's definitely become one of mine. We are all Moors. Islam. He's a killer. Norman Jill killed him. He killed him.
Norman Jill is the killer.
Level. Page 60. Many Hispanics in the United States are in some ways what the Jews used to be. And reclaiming one's Jewish heritage might strike a blow at the essentialist ideologies of Anglo-Saxon supremacists. So imagine the surprise that must hit those who find out that they are not Jews, but North African Muslims, the Moors of old. The year 2005 was certainly not a good time to find out that one is Muslim, at least not in post 9/11 quote unquote American. Yeah, that's putting it lightly there. But the reason why I started off dead is the other page of 61, where our good brother, Mr. Majid, Dr. Majid, goes in on Haram Torres, a bright Yale student, dropped college for Pakistan, and other Latinos were part of a large contingent of African Americans and Latino Muslims volunteering to fight for Muslims' causes in Bosnia, Chechnya, Lebanon, Afghanistan. Even the firebrand leader of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, started urging his fellow Venezuelans to return to their Arab roots. Okay. Starting to see why Chavez had to go. Yeah. Okay. Islam.
Islam. Hold on, read that one again. Read that one again. You're going to play it.
Okay. Alright. So, Hiram Torres, a bright Yale student who dropped college for Pakistan, and other Latinos were part of a large contingent of African American and Latino Muslims volunteering to fight for Muslim causes in Bosnia, Chechnya, Lebanon, Afghanistan. Even the firebrand leader of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, started urging his fellow Venezuelans to return to their Arab roots. And it's cited as well. So if anyone's really interested, you go look at quote 8, citation number 8 in the back reference to see exactly where it came from. Now I say that, but I'm not done with Venezuela. I don't have the sources out because I didn't know we were going to touch upon. But there are a couple of interesting facts that anybody can verify easily through Google. One name in particular you may want to look at is Simon Bolivar, and what his relationship is to the continent as well as the Moorish Empire. Because you all know that he was a Freemason, and I'm not promoting or supporting any other group, nothing like that. But look at the flag of Venezuela and compare it to the flag of Haiti. You're going to see that the flags are very, very similar. They're exactly the same, except Venezuela has an additional emblem in the center field. There's a specific reason for that. And that specific reason was Bolivar was causing a ruckus over here on this side, trying to expel European powers. So much so, he got chased out of the continent. So what he did? Off the boat, cruised over on the current, landed on what they call Haiti, or Haiti. He chilled there for about 3 months, and in that time of recouping and getting his energy back up, someone of interest that we probably all know, we hear a lot of other groups talk about these names, but I never hear them talk about the story. But Toussaint Louverture, Yahweh Boulevard, gave him a flag of Haiti and said, we're going to give you 3 ships, fully stocked, so that you can go back and continue the fight. And the only thing that we ask, the only thing, is that you free everyone. Now, when you go watch, say, an Amazon Prime Video movie on Simon Bolivar, they're going to say, free the slave. Always free the slave or free the country. But when you go to the primal source, the prime source, it wasn't talking about a specific little spot on a so-called map. They were talking about the entire empire. How do I know this? This is my personal feeling. With some facts to back it, you can go on to RhodeIsland.gov's website and go to their history section, and you'll see that they had a statue of Simon Bolivar on their Capitol dome that was removed after a lightning storm or some such. That statue actually came out of New York City, Central Park. Now, what's New York City, Rhode Island, have to do with Simon Boulevard? That's down there, another so-called country. Well, hold on. It's more interesting than that, because when you check for statues of Simon Bolivar, you'll find them in places that make perfect sense. England, Egypt, Russia. Why do they have a statue of Simon Bolivar in those landmasses? Islam. Just leave you with a question. But when you figure out that answer, you really going to have this thing pretty. You'll be on a very good track of what's really going on.
Right. Now, again, going back to this Moorish connection to over here, right? If Moors are so African? If being Moorish is so nothing to do with America, then why would James Hagee report that the earliest records of Moors in South Carolina come from 1753, when two Moors named Abel Condor and Mahamut petitioned South Carolina's royal authority in Arabic for their freedom? Why are they petitioning South Carolina, which is over here, which is supposed to be Aboriginal and indigenous languages only? How come they're petitioning in Arabic for their freedom? Originally from the famed port city of Saleh in Morocco, the two men had been captured by Portuguese along the African coast. An English captain bought them from the Portuguese, and they ended up in South Carolina. The two Moors reacted angrily to their treatment as slaves, and this initiated their petition to the Royal Council. What became of them is not known, but their petition suggests that they thought themselves to have been illegally enslaved. This would most certainly have been the case if they were aware of and understood the diplomatic relationship between the two empires of Morocco and Britain. Upon observing some of the major treaties drawn between North Africans, Europeans, and the United States, it is clearly apparent that quote-unquote Moor was a specific reference to those persons within the dominions of the Moorish Empire, not within the dominions of Morocco, within the dominions of the Moorish Empire. That's why South Carolina could listen to the petition by these Moors, because South Carolina is part of the Americas, and the Americas is part of the Moroccan Empire. We note in Morocco's treaty with Britain, June 14th, 1801, the specific use of the term Moor. In the U.S. treaty with Tripoli, February 23rd, 1805, the specific term of Tripoline is used to refer to those North Africans treated with. In the Treaty of Peace with Algiers, 1815, the U.S. refers to subjects of Algiers. Hence, one must understand that when used in treaties, Moor was clearly not a general reference for any and all Africans or dark-skinned persons everywhere. Legally and diplomatically, Moor designated only those persons whose ancestry and allegiance was understood to have been linked to the dominions then recognized as part of the Moorish Empire. That's why these people gotta be on reserves, because they choose to be stateless instead of having a nationality which ties them to the Moroccan Empire. That's why these people get to go on YouTube and put up all type of BS that they want, calling you whatever it is that you want, because they're speaking right in line with the colonists of the papal edicts that said, keep not calling these people Moors. Don't call them Moors. Don't even mention the word Moor. If you are going to say Moor, make sure you say it in a derogatory term. That's exactly what these people are doing. That's exactly why they're out here doing what they're doing, because they're part of the Inquisition against the Moors, which is still going on today. And again, which is why we put up that Curimeo video where him talking about Charles V and the Indians getting branded with the C by Charles V because it's a Moor versus Moor war. What side are you on? Are you on the sides of the Moors getting branded? Or are you side with the Moors doing the branding? And majority of people are on the side of the Moors being branded and actually accepting it from their so-called brothers and sisters, branding them. And like we said on the weekend, branding is not some hot iron in the fire and put it on your skin. Branding is calling you indigenous. Branding is calling you Cherokee and Chippewa and Nanticoke and all these fake Lenni, Lenape, and whatever other BS that they want to make up to say that that's who you are, when really you're Moors. And you can't even get around it because everybody else knows. You're going to go to Ecuador and they have a Moorish tower there. Why do they have a Moorish tower in Ecuador? Go look it up. Moorish tower. Why do they have a Moorish tower in Ecuador? Why? They just have a Moorish tower in Ecuador because over here has nothing to do with Moors? How come it's not a Indian tower? How come it's not a Native American tower? How come it's not an autochthonous Aboriginal and Indigenous tower? Remember, people from Ecuador are Aboriginal and Indigenous here. They've been here. They're not modern people. They're ancient. Why are they calling their stuff Moorish? Just because they're bored? They don't know what to call themselves? They're not playing that stupid stuff like these people are playing with you. It's our people playing that BS.
Yep.
Right? The people who are down with the Inquisition, trying to keep you in perpetual servitude so that you don't get free. I'm telling you, radical enlightenment. Bat to your head to wake you up. No little slap, no throw water on you. Spike bat. Right to your head. You wake up quick fast when you get slapped with the spike bat. Guaranteed. You wake up and now you want to go back to sleep. You be studying so much after the Moors done with you. You think that you... When the Moors done with your bitch ass, you have the toothpicks under your eyes. Don't want to sleep. Have you scared to go to sleep? Have you terrified of going to sleep? Islam Moors. What else y'all got? Y'all have anything else there?
Just one more point from me, Yaneki. You caught me on that chat. And I know that someone had posted something to the effect of, they're confused. They think they're Moors or Israelites, trying to ban the whole thing as if it's one. And yes, an Israelite could be a Moor, but not every Moor is an Israelite. And according to our good friend, Anur Majid, got to, Brother Yusuf, thanks. A Jew is not a Jew until he converts to Islam. Not stated by Brother Ed or Brother Yusuf or Brian Ackley Joe, but back by Peter the Venerable.
Peter the Venerable.
1094 and 1156.
Islam.
Just to add on real quick, all these dates, I love the prophet too. He's the one that came back and reminded us we stuck nigga colored black if it wasn't for the prophet.
Yeah.
But all of these dates that you guys mentioned predate 1913, and I like to mention that because they a lot of unconscious, or people who try to prove a point try to tie Moors into 1913. Like we don't predate 1913.
Right. No, since you brought up 1913, let me ask you the question to this, Morris. One of the people in their chat, I'm just going to go through the chat and then I'll throw out some stuff that was said in there so we could beat that up. Coco Kachina said, "Oh my goodness, I researched that the founder of the Moorish science was actually in his former life a real snake oil salesman." What Morris got to say about that?
It's on. What can one really say about it?
I don't know. I'm just curious.
From that there's so much garbage out there, and I'm just going to speak frankly. There's so much garbage out there that's specifically put out. To actually find the real, you need to really be well versed in your studies. And wise in the camp, for everything that we find in the past, none of us were there. But it gets a little overwhelming when you find facts that are verified by other sources from other time periods greater than what you will stand.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it at that.
Islam. Islam, brother Yusuf, what you guys say about these people talking crazy about your prophet?
Yeah, what was the statement that they found? What?
They did research and found out that he was a snake oil salesman.
A what salesman?
Snake oil.
Snake oil? Snake oil salesman?
Yeah.
Oh, just that. Okay. They can get the book, Serpent in the Grail. Forgot the name of the author, but you can Google it. It's called Serpent in the Grail. And it explains to you all about snake remedies, magic potions that shamans dealt with, all with snakes. That's old. They were selling snake remedies in the 60s, 50s, 40s. That was commonly known. You could just do regular research. They've always been selling snake remedies. That's an old shaman practice. Just see, that's the thing. We think. What do you think? You're supposed to just go get Tylenol? Like that doesn't work like that. You're not supposed to be even taking that. Like, what are you taking? See, that's the crazy thing. That reminds me of that post you posted earlier. Like, people got to do research to notice that fruits and berries and nuts are actually healthy for them. Yeah. Like, that's the thing. You think Tylenol, aspirin, ibuprofen is really supposed to cure you? Like, no, that's wrong. That's not. You're not supposed to be taking that stuff. But we're so out of whack. Eurocentric thinking. We're questioning the serpent remedy, but we didn't do any research on it, any research on it, because we still watching movies and think when you get bit by the snake, all of this, you're gonna die. What was this? My mobile told me somebody cut their finger off, cut their finger off because they got bit by a snake. Thought they was gonna die. Got to the doctor. Doctor told him you didn't have to cut your finger off. Well, because he's incompetent, watching TV, movies, and I got bit by a snake. This man done cut his finger off. Nothing was gonna happen to him. Nothing but ignorance. We need to study. You will see that's commonly known about the snake remedies. That's not even hard. That's not even out of whack. That's just doing regular research. That's coming from Eurocentric Christian background thinking. That's what that is.
Yeah. Now, another thing in their chat, the True King states, if you hate the Moors, you hate yourself. The blues in Mississippi came from Islamic Moors. 2/3 of Mississippi were Muslims, which were Mississippi and Alabama. And the Moors are the first people. Drew Ali came to tell you that you are from America. The only Moorish Islamic institute in the world is in Jackson, Mississippi. Go to PBS on MS Station and you can see it for yourself. And I'm from Mississippi. Now, what do you say? Somebody said, absolutely in their chat, said that Moors came to conquer only. Do you have any thoughts on that?
How do you come to conquer from what you already come from? I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I don't know. Question's colored as a mofo.
Yeah, apparently you want me to look at through a lens that is way out of whack. I can't do that to understand your question.
You got 20/20 vision and wearing the glasses like you can't see something.
Yeah.
Ray Stone said, personally, Moors are the ones that taught me law and legal terminology in America. We need that knowledge. That's right. That's right, Ray Stone. Let them know.
Islam, Grand Chief. Islam, Grand Haki.
Yeah.
Islam, brother. You're so bad. Don't forget your thanks, man. I just want to go back on that last comment about the Moors only conquered or whatever.
Yeah.
We're talking about the art and cult of civilization. Conquer. We did it. We did it all. We brought everybody. How we brought the light to the world. To the world, and all we did was conquer. That's crazy. That's incredible. When you check the history, you get the book Stolen Legacy. Talks about the Moors and how we got and we spread it all in. Did it all. Moors did it all. They did no research. None. That's incredible. That we conquered. That's incredible. Taught people how to. These Europeans wasn't even taking baths. That's not conquering when you teach somebody how to wash. Weren't washing. Again, they can get Golden Age of the Moors from Dr. Ironman's tournament. He took in with all the Dr. Jose Pineda Bay, everybody, plenty of references of what the Moors did to civilize the world.
Yeah.
We conquered. Unbelievable. I'm not saying Dirty Moors ain't, because Dirty Moors is conquering now.
Yeah,
for the Red Shield family and all of that. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it was Moors trying to conquer then, yeah. But don't just throw the Moors who were the art and cult of civilization and bring the light to the world. Don't just push them to the side. We did it all. It's not just the back nod. I mean, brother is, forgive me.
Islam.
I did want to make one comment, Grand Eki, about a previous question you asked about our prophet and the snake oil selling. Now, I'm assuming that the person that's saying this is taking snake oil to be the 19th century connotative meaning, being that it's shyster, con artist.
Right. Con man. Yeah, con man or something like that.
Sells fake stuff, right?
Right.
Now, you got to think about this. This is just a question to the listening audience. If you make your quote unquote income selling aspirin pills, and you start noticing dips in your sales, you're going to see, probably investigate why. And you come to find out that someone found the bark that you was extracting to make the pills and make it a tonic. And it was working just as effective as your pill. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and Brother Yusuf, The Serpent in the Grail, was that by A.A. Atanasio?
Okay. I'm in my library looking for it right now. I was just gonna. I'm glad you did that for me. Give thanks.
I got your mental email.
Okay, how about this one? The only reason Moors know the laws is because of their European descent, meaning that Europeans taught the Moors something.
Yeah. If we taught the entire world, if we brought them civilization, what do you mean the Europeans taught us something about law? We created law. We're all law. Each and every one of us. You just got to tap into it.
Somebody really said that?
Yeah, somebody really said that.
Yo, that's crazy. The only reason why Moors know the law is because Europeans what?
Because of Europeans' descent.
Because of European defense?
Because descent, because of the Moors' European descent is why Moors know the law.
That's colored. I don't even know what that meant.
Okay. Now somebody asked him this question. You had the Duke of Tears on, and I was waiting for him to talk about how he connects to the Moors to this land. If it is a fiction, but it sounds real legitimate, I'm waiting for you to speak on that. Of course, they didn't talk on that. Because we all know that Asir, the Duke of Tears, is a Moor. You know that he's a Moor. And they gladly had him on their channel. So what's the issue? Right, obviously, they were using the Moor for views. How about the statement, Moors are trying to usurp the history of the Aboriginals when they say Moors are from America?
That person needs to learn a little more about history, because it doesn't take much to go look whatever tribe you want. You'll find the sellout papers. They're fairly recognized, they're fairly sold out. Not one treaty has ever been adhered to. Why are you trying to push that agenda? Not saying you can't call yourself Cherokee. I'm not saying you can't call yourself Arawak, Taino, whatever. Do you? Just put more at the back of it. See how the world changes.
Right.
Moors took the Aboriginal history and are distorting it. Okay. We mentioned this before. The whole reason why their platform is even ongoing, it's in continuation, like it exists, is because of the Moors who laid down the foundation of us being Moors are the Aboriginal indigenous people to the land.
Mm-hmm.
No, they weren't Canaanland Moors, Army Day Publications, Brother Hakeem, Todd, Brother Taj, all the greats. C. Freeman Nell was doing videos in doing classes in 97. It's on YouTube.
Shit.
You got in the corner of the video, it says 1997. 1997. That stuff amazes me when I read. I'm like, it's a 12-week class that he was teaching on Moorish identity in 1997.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what do you mean we distorted something history? How?
Now,
Like,
I don't want to cut you, but I see they're back up again, and I think Moors on there beating them up right now. So let's just go hear what's going on over here, quick, fast.
The mound builders, the Mississippian culture. These people, some people over there was called the Quachita people. Right. Quachita changed to Washita. All right. Now, this lady, she was tied to this tribe through bloodline, and she went to court, and she won back access to the land and everything through paperwork and bloodline and everything. Right. Now, after doing that and gaining her indigenous status, she created a nation. And the nation stands on the back of the Aboriginal American Indians that was here. That's her ancestors. But she changed what she did now when she met the Moor guy who started the temple. I remember what his name is. I don't want to sound disrespectful because I'm not trying to do that. She brought the whole Moorish concept and the religion and everything to the nation. So this nation is not a Moorish nation per se. It's an indigenous nation tied to a Moorish religion. I can prove it. Look over here. What it says over here. The wiki. Quashita. The Washita people are the people in our Native Americans tribe who live in northeast Louisiana along the Quashita River. Their name has also been spelled as...
Oh, so Washita is actually a river. Washita is actually a river. That's why they call them Moors. That's why they're recognized, like the Moors said, by the UN as the oldest indigenous people in the world. But they're not Washita. They are Moors. It's real simple if you use your common sense. But if you don't want to use your common sense, it's okay. If you want to avoid using your common sense, it's quite all right. Know that you're only playing yourself. Know for a fact that you're only playing yourself. Because again, Noble Drew Ali told us that we're Moors. He was Cherokee. If he's Cherokee, and he came and said that we're Moors, not that we're Cherokee, obviously something's wrong with Cherokee. Obviously calling yourself Cherokee is a problem. Why is it a problem? Because Cherokee is a tribe. Some people say Cherokee is a language. And if Cherokee is a language, it can't be an identity. No different than Spanish is a language, so it can't be an identity.
Washita by English speakers. See? Many landscapes, features, and places have been named from them since colonization of the region by Europeans and Americans.
So these Europeans saw these Moors living by the river called Washita and called them Washita. When we already know that The Europeans came over here, saw these so-called Indians and said, these Moors. Why? Because they look just like the Moors that they just conquered across the Atlantic. When they came here and saw the people who looked just like the people across the Atlantic, they said, these Moors, mad that there were Moors over here too. Now, don't go with us. How about we go and ask the Turkish president, Tayyip Erdogan. He made the claim during a conference of Latin American Muslim leaders in Istanbul, pointing to a diary entry in which Columbus mentioned a mosque on a hill in Cuba. Mr. Erdogan also said Muslim sailors arrived in America in 1178. He said he was willing to build a mosque at the site Columbus identified. This is the Turkish president. The Turkish president was willing to build a mosque, not a teepee, not build some Indian whatever. He was willing to build a mosque. Now, the other question we have to ask ourselves is, why is there a Muslim, a Latin American Muslim leaders conference in Istanbul? What are they doing meeting over there? And why are they willingly letting them go over there to go meet? And then the president of over there wants to build a mosque over here. Why wouldn't he just build it in Turkey since the conference is over there? The Turkish president, whose AK party is rooted in political Islam, gave no further evidence to back up his theory, instead stating contacts between Latin America and Islam date back to the 12th century. But in a disputed article published in 1996, historian Yusuf Marui said Columbus' entry was proof that Muslims had reached the Americas first and that the religion of Islam was widespread. Mr. Erdogan said he thought a mosque would go perfectly on the hill today and that he would like to discuss building this with Cuba. They don't know. They really don't know. It seems like we're the ones, our people are the ones, the only ones that don't know. They know everything else. As soon as we start talking Moorish, all of a sudden they don't know.
And they track that date into being around 12,000 years ago, which is roughly about 10,000 BC. You see what I'm saying? Which is the same time frame that they give you of a Bering Strait. It's the same time period that the western shores of Africa started to get populated, and amongst some other things that's happening around 10,000 BC, along with the mass extinction of animals. And some of the most pseudo shit that I've ever heard is that the Native Americans, quote unquote, wiped out and killed all these animals. And we're talking about 75% of large mammals on the northern continent wiped out within a couple of weeks. That's virtually impossible from alleged hunter and gatherers. And not to speak that the meat wasn't even being used. It was just, they was just slaughtering for fun, which is...
Oh, forget them Aboriginals. Let's go to our references. Moors in America, page 43. Digging for the Red Roots by Mahir L. I am a Muslim of Cherokee Blackfoot American Indian community. I am also known as Eagle Sunwalker and serve as a pipe carrier warrior for the Northeastern Band of Cherokee Indians in New York City. There are other Muslims in our group. Many people are not aware of the Native American contact with Islam that began more than 1,000 years ago by some of the early Muslim travelers who visited us. Some of them lived among our people. Most Muslims and non-Muslims are not aware of this fact and have never seen it mentioned in any of the history books. Many documents, treaties, legislation, and resolutions passed between the 1600s and the 1800s show that Muslims were in fact here and were very active in their communities. The Peace and Friendship Treaty signed on the Delaware River in the year 1787 bears the signatures of Abd al-Kak and Muhammad ibn Abdullah. This treaty details our continued right to exist as a community in the areas of commerce, maritime shipping, and our form of government, which at that time was in accordance with Islam. According to a federal court case from the Continental Congress, we helped put the breath of life into the newly framed Constitution. All of the documents are presented in the National Archives as well as the Library of Congress. If you have access to records in the state of South Carolina, read the Moorish Sundry Act of 1790. In a future article, inshallah, I will get into more detail about the various tribes, their languages, and the influence of Arabic, Persian, and Hebrew words on some of their languages. Almost all of the tribes' vocabulary includes the word Allah. The traditional dress code for Indian women includes the kima and long dresses. For men, the standard fare is turbans and long tops that come down to the knees. If you read any of the old books on Cherokee clothing up until 1832, you will see the men wearing turbans and women wearing long head coverings. The last Cherokee chief had a Muslim name, Ramadan ibn Wati. Cities across the United States and Canada bear names that are of Indian and Islamic derivation. Have you ever wondered what the name Tallahassee means? It means He, Allah, will deliver you sometime in the future. In Cherokee, we refer to ourselves as Anianwia, or I am a township person. More on cities of Muslim among American Indians. The famous Muslim geographer and cartographer Al-Sharif al-Idrisi, 1099 to 1166, wrote in his famous book Nuzat al-Mushtaq fi Istirak al-Afaq, Excursion of the Longing One in Crossing Horizons, that a group of seafarers from North Africa sailed into the Sea of Darkness and Fog, the Atlantic Ocean, from Lisbon in order to discover what is in it and what extent were its limits. They finally reached an island that had people and cultivation. On the fourth day, a translator spoke to them in the Arabic language. The Muslim reference books mentioned a well-documented description of a journey across the Sea of Fog and Darkness by Sheikh Zain Eddin Ali Ben Fadhel al-Mazarandi. His journey started from Tafaya, South Morocco, during the reign of King Abu Yaqub Sidi Yusuf, 1286 to 1307, sixth of the Marinid dynasty, to Green Island in the Caribbean Sea in 1291. The details of his journey are mentioned in Islamic references, and many Muslim scholars are aware of his recorded historical event. Sultan Mansu Kankan Musa was the world-renowned Mandinka monarch of West African Islamic Empire of Mali. While traveling to Mecca on his famous Hajj in 1324, he informed the scholars of the Mamluk Bahri Sultan court that his brother, Sultan Abu Bakari I, had undertaken 2 expeditions into the Atlantic Ocean. into the Atlantic Ocean. When the Sultan did not return to Timbuktu from the second voyage, Mansa Musa became Sultan of the empire. Columbus and early Spanish-Portuguese explorers were able to voyage across the Atlantic thanks to a Muslim geographical and navigational information. In particular, maps made by Muslim traders, including Al-Masudi in his book Akbar Azaman, History of the World, which is based on material gathered in Africa and Asia. As a matter of fact, Columbus had two captains of Muslim origin during his first transatlantic voyage. Martin Alonso Pinzon was the captain of the Pinta, and his brother Vicente Yanez Pinzon was the captain of the Nina. They were wealthy expert ship outfitters who helped organize the Columbus expedition and prepared the flagship Santa Maria. They did this at their own expense for both commercial and political reasons. The Pinzon family was related to the Abu Zayan Muhammad III, the Moroccan Sultan of the Marinid dynasty. Arabic Islamic inscriptions. Anthropologists have proven that the Mandinkas under Mansa Musa's instructions explored many parts of North America via the Mississippi and other river systems. At Four Corners, Arizona, writings show that they even brought elephants from Africa to the area. Columbus admitted in his papers that on Monday, October 21st, 1492, while his ship was sailing near Jabara on the southeastern coast of Cuba, he saw a mosque on top of a beautiful mountain. The ruins of mosques and minarets with inscriptions of Quranic verses have been discovered in Cuba, Mexico, Texas, and Nevada. During his second voyage, Columbus was told by the Indians of Espanola that Black people had been on the island before his arrival. For proof, they presented Columbus with the spears of these African Muslims. These weapons were tipped with a yellow metal that the Indians called guanin, a word of West African derivation meaning gold alloy. Oddly enough, it is related to the Arabic word gina, which means wealth. Columbus brought some guanis back to Spain and had them tested. He learned that the metal was 18 parts gold, 56%, 6 parts silver, 18%, and 8 parts copper, 25%, the same ratio as the metal produced in African metal shops in Guinea. Dr. Barry Fell introduced in his book Saga America, 1980, solid scientific evidence supporting the arrival centuries before Columbus of Muslims from North and West Africa. Dr. Fell discovered the existence of Muslim schools at Valley of Fire, Allen Springs, Logo Marcino, Keyhole, Canyon, Washoe, and Hackinson Summit Pass in Nevada, Mesa Verde, Colorado, Mimbres Valley, New Mexico, and Tipper Canoe, Indiana, dating back to 700 to 800 CE. Engraved on rocks in the arid western US, he found texts, diagrams, and charts representing the last surviving fragments of what was once a system of schools at both an elementary and higher level. The language of instruction was North African Arabic, written with old Kufic Arabic scripts. The subject of instruction included writing, reading, arithmetic, religion, history, geography, mathematics, astronomy, and sea navigation. The descendants of Muslims visitors of North America are members of the present Iroquois, Algonquin, Anasazi, Hokum, and Olmec native people. There are 565 names of places, villages, cities, towns, mountains, lakes, rivers, etc. in the USA and Canada, which derive from Islamic and Arabic roots. These places were originally named by the natives in pre-Columbian periods. Some of these names carried holy meanings, such as Mecca, Indiana, Mecca, Indian tribe in Washington, Medina, Idaho, Medina, New York, Hazen, North Dakota, Medina, Ohio, Medina, Tennessee, Medina, Texas, Medina, Ontario, Mahomet, Illinois, Mona, Utah, Arva, Ontario. A careful study of these names of the native Indian tribes revealed that many names are derived from Arab and Islamic roots and origins. Anasazi, Apache, Arawak, Arikana, Shavin, Cherokee, Cree, Hohokam, Hoopa, Hopi, Maka, Mahigan, Mohawk, Nazca, Zulu, Zuni, etc. Based on the above historical, geographic, and linguistic notes, a call to celebrate the millennium of Muslim arrival to the Americas 5 centuries before Columbus has been issued to all Muslim nations and communities around the world. Now, why would Anasazi be Arabic and Islamic root and origin? Apache, Arawak, Cherokee. I thought those were Aboriginal indigenous. If those are Aboriginal indigenous, then how come? Why is it that they're not called Aboriginal and indigenous names? No, Islam, brother Tallahassee. And Tallahassee is a Moor. So if Tallahassee is a Moor, and the place Tallahassee has a lie in it, and the Moor is named Tallahassee, and he's got El Bay, then spike back to your head. Wake up. Stop sleeping. It has to be wake up time. It can't be sleep time still. And if you want to sleep, then fall victim to the radical enlightenment. Because trust me, we have never been playing games with these people. We have never been playing games with these people. Right? We've always stuck to making sure that we put the truth out. There's no time for games right now, especially if the whole entire international community has put it on the record. The whole entire international community has put it on the record that indigenous people have a right to a nationality. And we already know that Cherokee and Chippewa and all that stuff have nothing to do with nationality. Zero. Have zero to do with nationality. Islam, Moors. Islam. I don't know if you have anything else to throw out there.
It didn't say everyone has a right to a tribe.
Oh no, I don't think so.
Okay.
They don't have a right to a tribe.
Nationality.
Yep. They definitely don't have a right to a tribe. I know that.
Because I'm glad you bring that up, because that's where it causes a lot of the confusion. Because we know for a fact that Moor is a nationality, like we know that. And then we ask these people their nationality, we get the whole runaround for years, man. The whole runaround, from nobody can tell me my nationality to they start mentioning tribes again, and but nope, none of that. They start the Aboriginal people. That's the adjective. You went from the adjective black to the Aboriginal adjective. Just switching indigenous adjective.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what they're killing themselves every time they speak. I'm like, Because I'm listening to them when you were just playing them live. And I'm like, they're never going to mention the nationality. That's the first thing I said. Never.
Never.
But quick to be like, we're not Moors. And then we asked them, well, what's your nationality? And then we start getting confusion and like a bunch of, we got to hear a whole story and all the, like, they got to break it down. What do you mean break it down? Like, no other people on the earth have to break down who they are. They just tell you their nationality. Yeah. They got to break down because the word in this, it means this, and that's why we're this. And no. Because it's another one. They're going to, now they're calling themselves Indios, not Indian. They're Indios. So I looked up Indios. It just means any member of the Aboriginal people of America. I said, so okay, what's the nationality? This means any member. And as soon as I see member, I'm thinking club, join something, you signed up. I don't see nationality. Nowhere in the definition did it say nationality. It said a member of any of the Aboriginal people, like clans or whatever they was called. You can look it up. You can Google it. Nothing to do with nationality, and it's a new term. Mm-hmm. I remember. So I was writing it to another one of the so-called Indios people, and he's telling me that it's in the Latin Ecclesiastical Dictionary. The word Indios, like there goes your reference. But he don't know, like, I'm a big knower of man does not know a man is told. So I'm gonna go look up your dictionary. Right. And then I go look up the dictionary. It's Italian. It's not even Latin. It's Italian for European. It says Italian for Christian thought. That's what the book said. It is Italian for Christian thought. I said, no. This is where y'all got your definition of Indios from? It's not even Latin. It's Italian. And this is where they just reaching. This for the views. Because I have no idea what else it could be.
It must be about views. Has to be. Can't be about anything else. Because again, the people aren't going to be liberated, emancipated, free, or whatever without a nationality. You can say whatever the hell you want. You can go on YouTube for 8 hours, putting out 50 million books, references. If the people who are listening don't understand that they have to have a nationality in order to be able to use that information that they're getting it, then you're just wasting time with them. Just wasting time with them. And again, they get mad when Moors go on their stuff, because our first thing is, hey, what's your nationality? And like Brother Yusuf said, they want to get mad and they want to beat around that and talk about everything else. Moors are slave traders. Moors are this and that. What language is Moor? No, how about answering the question, what's your nationality? Don't tell me some tribe is your nationality. Because I guarantee you, if we hold these people upside down and go in their pockets, when their wallet drops out, they don't have anything saying that they're Cherokee and Aboriginal and all that stuff. And if they do have something like that, guarantee they got it from the colonizer. Guarantee they got it from the colonizer. But then they're gonna tell Moors about some European Moorish connection and more. Oh yeah, let's talk about that for a sec. That lie they tell that Moors got their fez from the Shriners and that Moors are, Masons. If you Moors have any thoughts on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Please, more.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Now, the Moors stole the fez from Masons. Now, I'm pretty sure they're talking about Scottish Rite, European colonizer, Freemasonry. That's what they're saying. Like the Shriners parade, those people who those Europeans who be walking around, I'm pretty sure they're talking about that.
Right.
Now, that stuff alone doesn't even go past the 17th century. But we can find Egyptian tombs with feathers on the so-called pharaohs or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
You can see Egyptian carvings with we've seen the carving of the I think it was L with the fez on, 5 on the left, 2 on the right.
Yeah.
We see all of it, like all of this by thousands of years predates Freemasonry or Mason Shrinery and stuff like that. And another thing too to add on, C. Freeman L, Master Teacher C. Freeman L, teaches that the ancient word in Kemet for the word fez was Kez. Khez. Oh yeah, Khez. Kez. Now, the thing about that is, yeah, Khez. Yeah, you can find Kez in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of stuff in Mississippi. You already know about the mounds and all of that, but that's on this side. So when he said that, I was like, wow, that's over here in the Mississippi. Like that predates Masonry, Freemason, Shriners stuff. You can Google the oldest fez in the world, and it predates Masonry. That's just regular. That's not even hard. That's somebody just mad with emotions. Like you can just Google that. The oldest fez ever found. It predates Masonry. The Masons themselves will tell you all of that stuff they got from Moorish or Egyptian practices and stuff like that. That's not their stuff. The Masons will tell you. That's where we see it. That's where we find it. In the P. Hall books and stuff like that. All these Masons, they tell us that they get it from us. It's Moors who are unconscious and dirty, denying the fact. European Masons tell the beings. It's so-called Aboriginal autochthonous guys spreading confusion for views. Cause look, just to add on again.
Yeah, more.
In the book Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids, right? From Peter Tompkins on page 172. He goes, now I can't even read it, but he has a picture of the Mayan alphabet and the Egyptian alphabet. It's the same thing. It's the same. It's all that stuff is the same stuff. Same people. Not Indians and nothing like that. Nope, none of that. None of that. None of that. Some Indian, when they speak to Indians, all that stuff is stuff is light-skinned people and teepees with straight hair. That's all they show when they talk about Indians. That's all they show. They're not talking about Moors. So as soon as they talk about them people coming from the barren street, but these people have their show on for 4 hours and try to slide in something that has to do with them, like Indians were the Olmecs. No, they weren't. That don't work. That don't work like that. Like in any way, because that causes confusion. That's why. Once we already seen for a fact that the word Indian took place of the word Moor in 1621, but like once we saw that, like okay, that word Indian is out the door then, because it gets rid of all the confusion now. There's no more. You can't say Indian no more. Why? Because they just switched that word Moor out for it. It was just Moors, but they just skip past that fact. Like they don't even acknowledge it didn't happen. And then I look at them again, and I'm like, who are these people? Who are these? Who are these Aboriginal Indigenous scholar guys? Who are they? What TP college they went to?
Yeah. How much people fit in them TP colleges, anyways?
They just sit there and just try to find anything to disagree with Moors, and all they find is stuff to do with Moors.
But they're claiming unity, and then claiming that Moors are not about unity, when nationality is the unity.
Right. By definition.
Unity of estates.
Yep.
Oh yeah, speaking about estates. Let's put this one out there.
If you don't have no nationality, you can't deal with a state.
Let's put this one out there. Yeah, since they love to talk what their estate is. Let's put this out about their estate. Page 12, Religious Myths and Visions of America. Religious Myths and Visions of America by Christopher Buck. Before America became America, one of the original names for North America was Turtle Island. Historically, Turtle Island probably designated the region of the Northeast United States and contiguous territories in nearby Canada. While the geographical reference is real, the name itself, Turtle Island, is a myth. Today, the myth of Turtle Island is universally familiar to all Native Americans, but not to most non-Native Americans. Nevertheless, the idea of Turtle Island, but not necessarily the knowledge of the myth itself, is becoming increasingly familiar to the American public. Turtle Island is now part of American popular culture. Once exclusive to Native American folklore, the myth of Turtle Island has now been assimilated as a part of American folklore. Understandably, it is the idea or the metaphor of Turtle Island has taken root in American popular culture rather than the story itself. To supplement this lack of common awareness as the underlying narrative itself, the myth may be generally described as follows. Of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States, was certainly aware of the original vision of America as Turtle Island. On January 10th, 1802, Thomas Jefferson told the delegation of Wyandot, Ottawa, Chippewa, Potawatomi, and Shaughnessy chiefs, "Your blood will mix with ours and will spread with ours over this great island." The expression, "this great island," was not an appellation for America current among Euro-Americans. In other words, it was definitely not a widely used euphemism for the United States. Why? Because this is an estate, not island. This is not island. Continents are not islands. It's a fact that continents are not islands. And keep in mind, the Wyandot, Ottawa, Chippewa, Powhatan, and Shaughnessy chiefs' blood will mix with the Europeans and will spread with the Europeans. And obviously that's what happened. That's how Moors became as light as they are right now. And now they call themselves Indians and all this other BS. And then the Moors, who should be calling themselves Moors, are following the mix, following the inbreeding, and calling themselves the inbreeding tribal stuff, or the watered down perspective of the Moorish Empire, opposed to calling themselves the Moorish Empire. Islam more.
Islam. Just wanted to add something.
Go ahead, more.
I think it was earlier on. Someone was showing the coast of Maracabana as far as one of the earlier names of America.
Yeah.
Well, that was coming out of a book called Discovery of the Origin of the Name of America. I had to look in my library and found a copy.
Mm.
I find it funny because that's page 36 that they were showing. I just looked at page 35, just something to read this real quick. Spanish colonists adopted the native name of America to designate their first settlement on the mainland of the New World. But in those days, the rules of orthography were undefined. And in addition to the numerous errors of printing, names were spelled in any way which the writer considered most appropriate. And hence we have America, not only written as America, but as Nameroco and America and Maraca and Morocco, and of course America. So I'm saying, when you see something like that in the opening statement, this is so early on in the book, you already know the perspective that the author's going to be coming from. Right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that the information that's there can't be useful. There are things that can, but you have to have that in mind of where this person's truly standing.
Islam. And just again, just so you could slow down, because people might not have got what you just spelt or whatever, which again is going back to the same researcher, Aboriginal indigenous guy that read a particular page but left out the page that you just read, qualifying everything that we're saying, that we've been saying to these people, that over here is also Morocco, but they might have missed the spelling. So if you could just go over that again a little slower, so people get their pen, write it down so they could read it for themselves, especially the Aboriginal indigenous people who claim that they don't need books or whatever. We're just supposed to think to figure this out.
Islam. And to help them out, they show page 36. I'm looking at page 35. So, hence we have America, not only written as America, Amaraca, but as Americo, Amerioco, and Amerioca, Amerioca, Maraca, Maraca, Moraca, They added native word "fana," which Sir Walter Raleigh explains meant an equivalent of a country. Fana doesn't just mean equivalent of country. Now, some so-called Latinx folks might think Fana is a slang term, meaning that's my peoples, my folks, that's my crew. You know, this is where it's coming from. Fana was just an all-encompassing term of everyone on that land, the Moors.
Islam. I'll just take a reference too out of Exhuming of the Nation. Lahi Pleasant Bay, page 201. The total dominion of Amexem extended from the holy lands of its farthest eastern shores of Arabia, Havilah, and Ethiopia, Sheba, to its extreme western shores of present-day Alaska, southward to the Cape of South America. In modern times, Western Moroccan Kingdom came to be known by many names prior to its recent European labeling of America. Right? In modern times, the Western Moroccan Kingdom came to be known by many names prior to its recent European labeling of America. Some of the names since Amexem were Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, the land of Mu, Maroc, Al-Maroc, and Northwest and Southwest Africa. Although America was the name of the first Spanish explorer, Americus, to land on the continent north of Florida, the name was without definition then or now. Nevertheless, America is a prefix of AME in Amexem and the suffix of RICA of Africa, AME RICA. It is also very historically inaccurate for the biblical portrayal of extinction of the ancient Moabites on one hand, and then centers the entire New Testament around Yahshua on the other hand. Yahshua himself was of the true blood of the ancient Canaanites and Moabites and the inhabitants of Africa. Moorish Holy Quran 46:2. With a great-grandfather named Boaz and his Moabitess mother named Ruth, what else could Yahshua be but Moorish? See Book of Ruth. Noble Drew Ali said, "Children, your hair is not kinky. It is woolly like your brother Yahshua." This is to prove the Moabites were not only still around 2,000 years ago, but were still birthing holy prophets like Yahshua and Muhammad. Both are seeds of Abraham, as were Jesse, King David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Joseph by Mary, his father and mother. Question 26 and 27. Also, there were Moorish queens ruling and fighting pharaohs as far west as today's California. In fact, that state is named after one of the Moorish queens. Noble Drew Ali said Queen Neitha waged wars against 5 pharaohs right here in Chicago, Illinois, and unearthed a metal part with foreign writings on it. He also said the Moors first civilized the world because they were the only ones to traverse the desert, as other people died by the thousands as they left the Garden of Eden. When the wild beasts roamed the earth in large numbers and large birds' wings could be heard flapping from a great distance, it was the Moors that took the sword, went forth, and slew the beast to prepare for following civilizations. These beasts and birds were plentiful in northwest and southwest Amexem. The ancient Moabites of the civilizations from the land of Moab in the Holy Land of Canaan are the true fathers and the modern Moorish nations and the original inhabitants of the continental Americas. Noble Drew Ali taught the Moors from 1913 until his passing in 1929. Today's Moorish nations are founders and inhabitants of the North, South, and Central Americas with their Atlantic islands. Unfortunately, only a few Moors believed they actually owned the very land which had enslaved them for 400 years. And so the true teachings went unlearned, unresearched, and unknown until the later historical works of J.A. Rogers, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Lerone Bennett, and others. Facts. Super facts.
Yep. That remind me when I ran into my fam down south, Uncle James Bay.
Yep. Uncle James, Islam to Uncle James Bay.
Because remember, I'm Cherokee, so-called. But when I did the research on the land and everything, he's on the land as Uncle James Bay. James Bay. Call my dad, ask about him, tell me, oh yeah, that's your uncle. Oh, okay. They know about him and everything. I'm looking at my dad like, what do you mean that's my uncle? His name is James Bay. Like, yeah, he got one of them things you got. And I'm like, oh,
he got one of them things. He got one of them things you got.
You got one of them things you got.
What things is that? You got one of them things you got.
They know.
That's crazy. You got one of them things.
And he's Cherokee, so-called Cherokee.
James Bay.
Elder in the fam. And he knows. He's a Moor. That was just surprising. I'm like, come on, man. It's already on the land. The Moorish title is already on the land. I ain't even gotta move. I'm already good.
Mm-hmm.
Cause he already, like Miami Prophet said, we're Moorish. He was born on the Cherokee reservation, like you said earlier. Prophet, he's Cherokee. He said he was a Moor. Uncle James Bay, he's Cherokee. He said he was a Moor. Simple. No, you gotta have a nationality.
You know you gotta have a nationality. Of course they know. Of course they know.
Oh yeah.
Moore sent me this, said to play this, so we're just gonna play this. It's probably said go to 16 minutes, play this. So let's just see. I don't know what it's gonna be, so hold your horses.
Consciousness.banzuku.motherfucking.com. Right, let's spread these wings. Goddamn, this man just celebrated a born day. Now, yeah, check this out, y'all. Come on, man. Look at Noble Drew Ali's birthday. He had Jupiter and Uranus in the sign of Libra. And Jupiter's upliftment, Uranus is mankind.
Y'all see the orbs around his face?
Jupiter is teaching, and Uranus is knowledge, right? Enlightenment. And Noble Drew Ali had this in Libra, so he tried to uplift humanity with the knowledge of the law, teaching the knowledge of the law. Okay? Cameron's 13X.
We'll just stop right there. All right? Everybody knows what's up.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows. Pretend like, they don't know, but everybody knows. Since they brought up Noble Drew Ali, let's go to Jose Pimenta Bay once again. Page 116. It is clear from MSTA sacred literature that great importance is attached to nomenclature and nationality. MSTA members think it is imperative to reject inappropriate designations for one's own self or people. MSTA belief attributes the imposition of such semantically pejorative, non-national names as Black, Negro, and Colored to the disobedience of Asiatic people, particularly the Moors. Essentially, Moors were and are punished for having violated Allah's laws. Enslavement was the primary penalty for Moorish peoples having failed to practice the 5 basic principles: love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice within their own societies. Needless to say, history reveals the sad legacy of internecine struggles between Africans. The record shows that the Egyptians fought the Nubians, the Ashanti fought the Akan, the Berbers fought the Mandinkas. Such disuniting of the Asiatic nations resulted in the decline of the African continent and Europe's consequential ascension. Similar events between American Indians resulted in the loss of this continent to individual profit-driven Westerners. The residue of this past still exists in the colonized minds of the African and American Indian peoples. The purpose of the Moorish Science Temple was to awaken misnamed Made in America Blacks to a more original consciousness and worldview, believing in a cosmology which held that God Allah would assist those who reclaimed their national origin and upheld the spiritual principles which affected all men. Drew Ali established the MSTA for decentered Negroes and Blacks. Ali certainly appeared to have been convinced that his position was validated by social and legal history as well as theology and theosophy. In an MSTA pamphlet entitled A Warning from the Prophet in 1928, Noble Drew Ali said, "The citizens of all free national governments, according to their national constitution, are all of one family, bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the national name of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables and are subject to all inferior names and abuses and mistreatments the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the names and principles that delude to slavery." Drew Ali explained that his Moorish movement was divinely sanctioned and recognized by all nations of the world. He said, "Through your free national name, you are known and recognized by all nations of the earth that are recognized by the said national government in which they live." Ali contended that all so-called Blacks and Negroes who declare their Moorish nationality can receive their divine rights unmolested by other citizens, can cast a free national ballot to the polls under the free national constitution of the United States government, and not under a granted privilege as has been the existing condition for many generations. You who doubt whether I, the Prophet, and my principles are right for the redemption of my people, go to those that know the law in the city hall and among the officials in your government and ask them under an intelligent tone, and they would be glad to render you a favorable reply, for they are glad to see me bring you out of darkness into the marvelous light. Drew Ali regarded any persons who accepted legal designations as Blacks, Coloreds, and Negroes as non-citizens because they were legally saddled with slave designates. he considered such persons to be constitutionally mandated undesirables, subject to whatever molestations or granted privileges which the said legal government chose to bestow upon them. In short, the life, liberty, and happiness of non-nationals was not guaranteed and protected by the United States Constitution, nor by the officials who swore to uphold it. Needless to say, Ali placed a great degree of importance upon the letter and power of the law, and American history does provide a rationale for Ali's stance. Historical inquiry offers some reasons and explanations for such a position. Islam. Islam wars.
Islam.
I don't know if you have anything else to add right now.
No, I'm gonna leave that for another one. That's all start a whole.
Page 124. The successful reclassification of any group, American Indian, African, or Asian, requires control. Slavery and military domination provided Europeans with that control. Forbes notes the historic decline of the American Indians. As the English became more involved in the African slave trade, they also became more ruthless in terms of seizing Americans. From 1670 onward, the English of South Carolina engaged regularly in the American slave trade, sending natives in the tens of thousands to the West Indies and other markets. Right? Why? Going back to that same thing. Because you're classed as undesirable. And if you're undesirable, aka savages, then nothing applies to you but death and destruction. Forbes informs us that the enslavement of indigenous populations occurred throughout Panama, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Mexico, Peru, and other countries through the 1500s. Great numbers of such quote-unquote slaves were procured and shipped to various locations. Amazingly, it is the same area which is known to contain many ancient African artifacts. There are also several documented references to pre-Columbian, semi-Christian Ethiopian settlers in that region. John Hope Franklin and Alfred Marsh Jr. even point out that specific dominions of Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela were known as New Granada. They attribute the name to the Spanish, yet the province's name seems strangely Moro-centric for Catholic Spaniards of that period. The designation of American Indian captives was often Catholic Spain. Significantly, such captive persons were customarily legally designated as Negroes before being sent to places like Salamanca and Seville. So great was the number of Negroes sent to those two cities that Ferdinand and Isabella issued a mandate in 1494 appointing Juan de Valladolid to act as their mayor, known as El Conde Negro, the Black Count. Valladolid was judge and mayor of Negroes, free men, and free women. In the Shaheed case, of 1913, Judge Smith referred to the first Naturalization Act of 1790 in order to explain its exclusion of certain African peoples as white. Smith said these free persons include the mixed Latin, Celtic, Iberian, and Moorish inhabitants of Spain and Portugal, the mixed Greek, Latin, Phoenician, and North African inhabitants of Sicily, and the mixed Slav and Tartar inhabitants of southern Russia. It includes people containing blood of very mixed races. There's not too much more that we could say. The majority of it has been said. And we know for a fact that Noble Drew Ali was right on point with everything that he presented to us. One, from the point that we're not Negro, black, colored, or whatever like that, because we're Moors. That we're not Aboriginal, Indigenous, and whatever like that, because we're Moors. That the Americas is really the Moroccan Empire. And the true heirs and possessors of the Moroccan Empire are the Moors of North, South, Central America, and the adjoining islands. Anybody else claiming that they got some authority or some power over here are probably running a fraud. Because again, nationality is the order of the day in these day and times. And if you do not have a nationality, then you shall remain stateless. That's not what we say. That's what international law says. So the Indians could say whatever it is that they want to say. Those who are of sound mind, those who are thinkers, those who do have all their sandwiches in their picnic basket, they're going to have a nationality and they'll be all right. So with that, 2 hours, 27 minutes, we'll definitely be closing out. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's just close out with this right here. Because the good Dr. Jose put something in perspective right here with regard to why we should say Moors and not all these other labels. It's page 190. From the Moorish perspective, true self-reliance only comes with self-confidence, and self-confidence is rooted in one's awareness of their past achievements. In short, a person or group must know more about themselves, their significance, and their achievements if they are to become strong. They must honestly love themselves for the gifts given to them by the Creator, God Allah. The Moorish identity represents one major aspect of the so-called Black self, which serves as a beacon to a better understanding of both the group and the individual self. As this study has noted, the term Moor is arguably more historically and semantically correct than the terms Negro, Black, or colored. Still, there are some valid criticisms which can be made about the movement. Simpson had criticized the Temple's members he interviewed in the 1940s for having a limited understanding of the organization's worldview. Based upon my own contemporary experiences as a member, I would actually partly agree with him. Even today, I have found Temple members who could not logically defend elementary organizational contentions. Such members would only refer to line and verse from official literature, something which non-members simply cannot fully or properly relate to. That was part of the sellout. But in all fairness, this would also be true of various mainstream groups and organizations. Simpson also contended that Moorish Americans needed a greater respect for individuality, and he advised them to seek cooperation with all groups. To me, his prescriptions resound with the classic voice of Eurocentric hegemony, misnamed white supremacy. It is a voice that too often advises individualism among African and Asian people while institutionally prescribing collectivity in mind and action among Europeans. The collective application of the systematically favorable term white among people of various European ancestries stands as one profound example. Regarding the issue of nomenclature, Simpson argued that it was unimportant and that Negroes didn't need a new name for themselves. But I would only say that I wonder how European Americans will respond if pink people or crackers were to suddenly become mainstream terms for their collective identification. As if you're meant to be is the man. The man. Peace and love to all Moors worldwide. Oh, shit, he keeps going in. Okay. Let's go again. Chapter 3 of this study presented and discussed some of the evidence of such contacts between American Indians and Africans. This study has shown that the dividing line between African peoples and American Indian peoples is often very thin. Consequently, one should better understand the logic of still employing more for America's Blacks, Negro, and colored peoples within Indian ancestry. Nevertheless, like the term British, the use of more does not need to supersede the use of tribal names like Cherokee, Abenaki, Micmac, etc. In light of the facts, we should better appreciate the profound words of the visionary scholar, the late Charshi Lawrence McIntyre. An interesting quirk within the African American reality, a majority claim Native American ancestry, Cherokee, Chickahominy, Blackfoot, and so forth, yet most only can acknowledge the biological connection. Few attribute any of their customs, beliefs, or rituals to their Native American ancestry. European Americans charged Native Americans with savagery and described them as culturalists. African Americans often mimic this practice and reflect a sense of shame about their Native American ancestry. McIntyre also agreed with Kenneth Wiggins Porter regarding the high degree of amalgamation between the peoples. Porter said that the amalgamation was so great that many African Americans probably should call themselves Afro-American Indians. And a great deal of evidence suggests that such amalgamation began in antiquity, and descriptions of Africoid Indians abound. Yet the aquiline-nosed, long-haired cigar store wooden Indian is the classic symbol of Americana and the American Indian. I have no doubt that the historic use of that icon has contributed greatly to limiting the phenotypic image which can legitimately use to represent an American Indian. Consequently, there are many American Indians walking around with socially imposed amnesia. Most of those amnesiacs would answer to the designation of Black. Historically speaking, Moor was clearly recognized by Europeans as the nationality. However, US history reveals that such a perception was most detrimental oversimplification. The white rights and favored status granted to Moorish and Indian nationals in colonial and US society proves that. Native American historian Jack Forbes noted that Americans' history of white and black is essentially a history of citizen and non-citizen or semi-citizen. It may be that Noble Drew posited that Moorish Americans in the US were legally aliens until they were naturalized in some way. But that would only make sense if one considered these lands as having formerly been under Moorish jurisdiction and only later taken over by what would become US government. Perhaps the reference to other aboriginals is a reference to Moors. Like defeated or political compromised American Indian nations, Moors too would have to actively apply for citizenship in the new quote-unquote country. If this was part of Ali's rationale, then temples have essentially been serving as nationalization centers for those who desire full citizenship. Once again, peace and love to all the Moors worldwide, wherever they're at. Islam to the Moors that joined in today for the session. We also want to say, make sure you do your research. Don't listen to what we're saying. Don't listen to what anybody's saying. Fact check everybody. And guarantee when you fact check, you're going to find out so much more information that you weren't told that you're going to realize the importance of knowing thyself for real, for real. And like the Moor said earlier, Islam to the AM Moors, the active Moors, and get right to the PM Moors or the passive Moors or the sleepy Moors, because AM is when you're up and then PM is when you're asleep. Peace and love to all the Moors, everywhere that you're at. You know that we got this. You know that nationality will forever be the order of the day. And you might as well a little something. Find a little something to close out with. I'm gonna take you back. Let's take you back. I'll take you back to some Iron Sheik 1. Don't forget Moors. willofallah.com, rvbaypublications.com, khalifamedia.com. And don't forget tonight, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, HHS, Eyes Wide Open, MHHS, Eyes Wide Open. Call in number 319-527-6751, 319-527-6751, and 425-569-5201, 425-569-5201. Call in early so you're not left in the dark. Again, Islam to Brother Iz and Brother Yusuf for dropping in today. They had to go do the apple picking. They already know how it goes. So you want to say Islam to the mothers for giving the Moors a few hours to get some work in. Peace and love to all, and to all a good night.
Word. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm Hispanic, I'm an artist, yeah, but I'm a human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a person, soy persona, yeah, but I'm a human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a figure, I'm a body, yeah, but I'm a human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a life form being, word, but I'm a human first. Y'all ain't ready, rock steady in reverse. Hago todo al revés, no half stepping backwards. Así se hace pues when you raised in the dirt. It's like a game of chess that you play when you hurt. Que sucio que te ves with that stain on your shirt. Mugriendo es, yes, I've had it since birth, word. That ain't grape juice that bursts through your chest. You might stop uno, but you can't stop the rest. Sometimes the opposite direction is best. Defy the right way, take a step to your left. Contrary to popular demand, refresh. Un momento, bring it back to the start, reset. He said, y'all ain't ready, rock steady in reverse. I got eyes in the back of my head like I'm cursed. I count down, I don't count up, it's a first. So I know what I've done before I do it, say word.
Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a more, for sure, hit you with all the cool curse. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. Entropia, persona, natural person first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a body, a vehicle, maybe human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a more, for sure, hit you with all the cool curse. Path, the right self, deified scrolls, gods on earth. Walking when my nation rolls the plan. Get melanin man back in the fold. To know we are the ones of who the scriptures told. We are the mold in an alchemy, base to gold. Fuck what you say. I'm not buying an album from Hove. To stop disease, my teas have cayenne pepper and clove. I know about all your sodomy and Bohemian Grove. In the arena, my action talk like Sonny Chiba. When I glow, you think coming, it's Hiroshima. Strangle a preacher with stairs, awaken a sleeper. And watch your back like Hanuman, Shimitar or Cleaver. Some hold back to astral project, I'm eager. Rituals and candle magic, I don't need a heater. Searching for all the coolers while they scuba diving deeper. Who rules the world now? The crew are like, not the Mika.
Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm Hispanic, I'm an artist, yeah, but I'm a human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a person, so persona, yeah, but I'm a human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a figure, I'm a body, yeah, but I'm a human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a life form being, word, but I'm a human first. Behold a pale roach, war clowns reign the most. I go all out, face a fallout, plain clothes. Miracle Mile, I went wild on the payphone. Your days are numbered, motherfucker, count your stage shows. The same drones who wanna be us, I hope can hear us. The sounds of misery projected through grim speakers. Detriment, excellent, skin heaters, attempting to capture the essence of true believers. These shallow kids drowning 2 milliliters. Weak fetus, a brown paper bag them like beef feeders. Who the fuck are you to claim the illest? I see you like Julius. You will be judged by the size of your mind frame. Pressure luck, your brain measures to a rice grain.
I get money, money I got in form of books. Money is paper, it takes 2 cents to me. According to Pop, most thugs are straight cowards and frontin' the according to Big, more money, more problems. But how's getting more gonna solve them? These young youths drinking that cold juice, no juice, straight vodka. His breast is profuse, top papers in the town, the star in the sun. Melanin men, diamonds make society run. Lily white dream, getting locked up with the team. Thinking your Scarface with the triple beam, and cops can't care less. Lay you on your bare chest with his foot in your back. The rookie found the gap, now you're up the river. The under 5 to 10 for possession is what they give you. I know that they're trying to kill niggas, genocidal and homicidal. Brothers act like rivals over fashion idols that just happen to be these lords so gay. That's why they want you hanging with your boys all day, catching cases and calling them racist in your jail cell. You see the guard shape shift over some dough. Some people calling it cream. Satan's cash rules everything around me. Scream. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a more sure hit you with all the cool curse. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. Entropia, persona, natural person first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe.
I'm a body, a vehicle, maybe human first. Y'all ain't ready, I'm a universe. I'm a more, for sure, hit you with all the coon curse.
Stop there for a minute. I want to just take a little time and just show some gratitude to your brothers that you see up here and the sisters that's not right here as well. But since I've been here, as long more, these brothers here have reached out for ones, has made sure that the mother teach staff has got me to and fro from here to there. As long these boys have made sure that ones have had the proper nourishment to go back and demonstrate these teachers down in Southern Illinois. As long they have also reached out to brothers from New York, from Canada, from all parts of the earth, my young boy. So you brothers and sisters that's here, take advantage of these moments.
When I speak, you can't talk unless spoken to. Most sound like records, broken to with no facts. Trust me, I'm not quoting you. Melanin beings do what they're not supposed to, going against the biological makeup. Instead of shooting sun rays, guns they take up to go against tanks and carriers of aircraft. When I use air, the beast says no witchcraft. When I use fire, speak truth and shut up a liar. If I use earth, I'm calling on fam from the hollow core. When I use water, flow like a tsunami on y'all. Martin Luther told y'all non-violence. He was a warlock, Rosicrucian, candle magic in silence. Been on this continent, living in minus degrees and temp, and the plus is where my mind is. Open up your mind, iris. I said it's ISIS. A sun here room is who the Christ is. Light of the world, watch me enlighten a nerd. In your stomach like the center, I'll frighten your turds. Give you the runs, patting your blurs with tones and words. Caucus skyscrapers are killing the birds. I'm giving you nerves and my goosebumps tingle your spine. You're listening to Iron Sheik and thinking it's prime. The absolute oils got me not stinking a dime. Can't check enough Pete's house, man, it's stinking a swine. Many sell out for a deal and sign with ink on the line. Incarcerating your speech for fiat, cars and yachts. Drinking devil's liquids, Henny and yacht. Rappers turn convicts, goddess turn bomb chicks. Niggas yelling fuck the police is nonsense. They got guns by the box and run your streets. Widow your so-called whore after they clap at your throat. Parole not, when caught, the gat didn't blow. I heard stories about men putting cock in a bra in the showers, or get guards to leave the watchtowers while the gang rape you in a bed of dead flowers. Thousands of brothers, they wore those briefs. Can't think how much semen is on those sheets. Most need to go in strong, not weak. Like my babe brothers, LeBron and Shakur Malik. It's not cool living in the jail cell. Rappers and MCs are liars and the truth they don't tell. Agents using examples of Larry Davis to have you shooting out with pigs from the basement to get caught and then become a killer replacement. Cops crooked like the eyebrow, plus they lie too. Seeing is believing, believing is fake. They say fuck fruition and have blind faith. They take your collection, won't give it to God. They take your perception and they give it to God. Seeing is believing, believing is fake. They say fuck fruition and have blind faith. They take your collection, won't give it to God. They take your perception and they give it to God.
A master had to come. That's the reason we're having the 80th convention. 80 years ago, a master came. He touched down on these shores. Allah's love thought made manifest. And his name is Noble Drew Ali. He is a thought of Allah made manifest. Islam. He came to make a proclamation to you. Come all ye Asiatics of North America and hear of your nationality and your birthrights.
thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself or know thy death. Know thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. Who made him Allah? What is Allah? The feminine primordial 5-point star. Can't be seen, I meet her in the heart. Noble Jew Ali manifests as a thought. Save nations, that's the prophet's duty. Founded before New Jersey turned to New Jersey. Born in NC, 1886 teaching. With Moors, not niggas and spits. Fallen humanity, he came to uplift. I'll say Islamism when you ask what with. Northwest, a Mexican angels manifesting. You're not a Mexican, but a Mexican. Those are the answers to their questioning. From the cast out laws representing. Higher self is virtues, mother and life. Preach justice, mercy, love and right. The higher self can't fall, will ever stand. Arm, leg, arm-headed man. No hatred, lewdness or slander. Murders, no theft or abuse from anger. MST of AAC chambers. Make young Moors think as Christ with no mangers. Teach the goddess no fear, hex up a stranger. Astral project, death comes in the form of dangers. You gotta know thyself or know thy death. Know thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself or know thy death. Know thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. Coming out the cares of the world on salvation. Holding humanity from the womb comes the nation. 7 days in the circle, 7 days in creation. She replaced the 7 on the mason apron. Troglodyte cavemen are the ones aping. We are from Asia, Asiatic, not Asian. Olmec and Maroon, not Jamaican or Bayesian. For fiat, dirty Moors are really paper chasing. Like April Fools giving papal dues to the Nazi, Ashkenazi, fatal Jews. Taking directions is not paying dues. Severe Base says the news is the daily snooze. Leaving your wife and child to chill with dudes who act like fools. Getting robbed and left in blood and pools. Peace officers always begging the public for clues. You gotta know thyself or know thy death. Know thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself or know thy death. Know thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. What did Sharif Abdul Ali say? We are what our foreparents were yesterday. No need for civil, we got birthrights. We struggle cause in ignorance we love to fight. Argue and quote opinions about religions. Rod taking hybrids off earth in millions. In the new ages, reveal sun pages and so-called holy books of custodial nations. With fraud, there's no statute of limitations. Abandoned the original, they fell for imitations. Then fell into skin, they're calling it sin. Light beings can't comprehend the darkness they're in. Trapped like a vesture, body is the tomb. Sisters get knowledge to teach us in the womb. Truth is, you since after first school. Before the water breaks, my son would come out like Kirikou. Gotta know thyself or know thy death. Know thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself or know thy death. Know thyself and know thy wealth. Know thyself, it's your duty. Know thyself, it's your duty. 5 on the left, 2 on the right. We give honors to the red flag with the green 5-point star. We give honors to the prophet, Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali. We give honors to the Grand Major Temple and the Grand Body. Yeah. Know thyself. It's your duty. Know thyself. It's your duty.
How many of you Asiatics in here know that you're white people? You know how the old gospel songs where they talk about white as snow? I want to be whiter than the snow. It's a status. It's not complexion. It is not complexion. There is no white nation in Europe. Don't exist. They might have peanut butter sandwiches, but they ain't a white nation. You understand?
On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When we start the revolution, all they probably do is squeal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When we start the revolution, all they probably do is squeal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When the truth gets revealed, all they probably do is squeal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. On the real, on the real. When I uplift the fallen humans from the ashes, the phoenix will rise and live on after it clashes. Feathers and head wraps, costume ball sashes. Atlantis and Pangea was us ruling the atlas. The mundane, some god, a numb brain. Judah is reincarnate, some self-proclaimed. Taking the lessons from Quran questions. Bible as my rolling pad, holy book, circle 7. Forerunner Marcus Garvey coming in the whirlwind. Moorish Boba Muftis in the black turban. Pioneer exposed as the triple crown glows. Every Negus has the Negus as his throne. The temple as the body. Truth as my shiny. With no bulge, I'm still armed without the robbery. Master arts martial, and they marshal the law. Peace offers of authority, fracture your jaw. Clapping at yaw at bachelor parties. Not knowing whether it's controlled by HAARP. Stopping the tapping of UH frequencies. Sent to the higher self from Sirius B, or maybe Sirius A. The reverse is serious internet radio play. Like Square Shreddies are now dominant new. Misleading, they try to build 50 for a shoe. It takes $5 to make. They load trucks with bins. Same goes for cars, construction Tims. So clean, no scuffs. Revolution chumps, reclining in the armchair, speechless like monks. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When we start the revolution, on they probably go squeal. Change is coming. I'm watching hybrids running for shade, cause Earth's hot, not like a preheat oven. Raid, the source for UV protection. If AIDS can go through the condoms, who you protecting? Neglecting the truth and lie accepting. Not in for be a person, reparations expecting. Planes going down, but you're not ejecting. Too busy flossing with the spinning rims and white feet is flexing. Fronts are fake elements, that's not real gold. Running from police with guns is not too bold, cause you got a gun but won't shoot back, son, or shoot first and earn your way off earth. Suicide is a sin and sin is ignorance. Not thinking clear makes you ignorant. Missing the message. Ego filling your brain with nonsensical thoughts just to drive you insane. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When we start the revolution, on the probably do it square. Our leaders labeled black, they were assigned to us. As ancients, we flew. We didn't have to ride the bus or drink at their fountain. We didn't even need our own. The gun is a penis and every man is holding a chrome. Thinking it's tough, but when you shoot, you bust. Like Dixon's holding you in with the camel of clutch. Smoking a Dutch, but taught much against the master. Sell out to pay karmic debt in the life after. Don't believe me, seek the truth. I hear Hail Hitler when I play back these hip-hop loops. That rap hip-hop, Nas said it's dead. Same gun he raps about, shot J in the head. Cripple a team. These ball players, they cripple a dream. Time the asses that they slap but won't get a bad rap. And rap sheets are written by them. It's police, not following Moors, but niggas booming in their Jeeps. Europeans on the bus, they acting like niggas. Straight off the plantation, looking like J Hill figure. From the foreigner, you'll never get compensated. This armor you men saying you strapped, you've been miseducated. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When we start the revolution, all they probably do is squeal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When we start the revolution, all they probably do is squeal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. When the truth gets revealed, all they probably do is squeal. On the real, all these dirty Moors know the deal. On the real, on the real.